Hi, my name is Sarayyah, and I work for Chubb Insurance Company as an actuary. And what that means is that I'm in charge of making sure that we are charging the right price for our insurance products.
Thank you. And can you tell me a little bit more about the importance of insurance, please?
Absolutely. And so I want to go all the way back to just let's think about what insurance actually is. So let's start from the basics here. You can think of insurance like a promise. It's a promise that they're going to help you out when you have a bad day. And I want to use the example of a car insurance. So, let's imagine you have a car and you know that sometimes things don't go as planned. You've seen car accidents, you've seen floods, broken windows in cars, things happen. But let's imagine that you're trying to have a budget and you're not really sure if you can afford 2,000, 3,000 pounds in any one month if something actually happens to your car. So what might be a good solution is the insurance contract. So now what you'll be saying is, I will pay a little bit of money every month to my insurance company, which I can predict. It's a fixed amount and I can manage that. And in the event that something happens, like let's say, hopefully not, but there is an accident, well, then my insurance company is going to cover that for me. So I actually don't have to come up with 3,000 pounds because my insurance company is going to help me out. And so you can think about insurance like a promise for a bad day. And there are many kinds of insurance. I just talked about car insurance, but you have home insurance. You have, in fact, there's insurance for airplanes. There's insurance for transporting goods. It's just really a crazy world out there when you start thinking about all the creative things that we can insure. It's anything that can possibly go wrong and be a bit hard to predict is something that we can build an insurance product around.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Can you tell us, please, what a normal day in the life of an actuary is like, please?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we're looking at pricing. So we want to figure out, well, how much should people put aside every month? And that can be a really tricky thing to answer. So we use a lot of mathematics in coming up with that answer. So let's go back to that example of car insurance and let's think about one client. So what are the characteristics of that client that could be relevant? Well, you might think, is it a Ferrari or a Toyota Corolla? Because the cost to repair a Ferrari might be a bit different than repairing a Toyota Corolla. So that might be something the insurance company wants to know. What's the cost of your car? How expensive is this vehicle that I'm insuring? But what about who's driving? Because that's also important. What if I am just getting my license? I'm going to drive my car. I don't have a lot of experience versus someone else who's been driving for 20 years and knows the area well and has never had an accident. Well, you can think that the insurance company might view those two people a little bit differently. And one of them is definitely more risky than the other. Another example that we might think about is the number of accidents that you've had. So maybe you have 10 years of experience and every 6 months you've gotten into an accident. Well, maybe you might be a bit riskier than someone who only has 2 years of experience but no accidents. So lots of things to consider here. So what the actuary does is take all of that data, millions of customers, and say, okay, look at all of these criteria. Can we model on average how many people with this criteria have more accidents than the other criteria? So again, coming back to that example, on average, how many people with 10 years of experience have multiple accidents versus someone who has 0 to 1 year of experience? So the actuary is running a model that looks at all of those combinations of criteria, and by the end, it's going to spit out, hey, given this client who owns a Corolla again and is 24 years old and has 10 years, or maybe not 10 years, 5 years of driving experience and 2 accidents, this should be the price they pay every month. So that's what the actuary is doing. So we're building these complex models to figure out the pricing of the products.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You've talked about data and models and statistics and averages. What other kind of maths do you use in your job?
We can get really, it's a lot of probability. If you think about it, it's really a lot of probability in my job, because the question we're trying to answer is, what are the odds of something bad happening? And so that is really the core part of actuarial science. We're trying to figure out, and unfortunately, yeah, it's usually bad things. What is the probability of a flood, or the probability of an earthquake, or of this house catching fire, someone slipping and falling in a restaurant? So very, very probability based. And within probability, you have different distributions. So the distribution is just sort of, if you think about it, is a shape of a graph. So that is a lot of what we do as well, just looking at statistical distributions and probability.
Great, thank you. And where do you get the information from on floods, for example?
You know what? When we look at modeling, we call it natural disasters. It's the hardest part, because there's not a lot of data. So in terms of where we would get the data for flooding, we would really have to. Sometimes it's hard, right? Because it depends on the area, firstly, and it depends on how that area has changed over time. So if we just think about 20 years ago, and there was a flood. Well, now, 20 years later, there's probably more houses, there's probably more expensive houses, there's probably a whole different look to that area. So the same event 20 years ago wouldn't be the same today. So in terms of where we get the data, we rely on historical data a lot, but we always have to think about, does it apply today? Maybe I need to, change it a little bit, because the world we live in today is not what we used to live in before. So a bit of a tricky answer there, but I hope you understand what I mean.
I do. Thank you. So it sounds like you'd have a lot of people working on these things.
Absolutely. In fact, for the big insurance companies, you'll have dozens of actuaries, and sometimes they can be split by different products. So as I mentioned, car insurance, property insurance, and you might have more than one actuary working on car insurance. If you're really big, and we think about a global company, you might have one or two actuaries working for Europe, then a couple working for North America, some working in Latin America. It's a really complex type of role, because there's so much mathematics involved. And so it definitely requires a few heads to get the right answer sometimes.
Thank you. And did you always know that you wanted to do this job?
Absolutely not. I probably found out very, very late in the game that I liked actuarial. I was already an actuary before I realized I liked actuarial. So for me, I really like sports. And so I wanted to be a sports statistician. So I always liked math, and I was trying to figure out how to do, sports and math in one. But when I was just graduating, I got an opportunity to work as an actuarial intern. And, after a year or two in that role is when I really started understanding how interesting actuarial can be. If you think about what I mentioned before with all of the different products, the cool thing about actuarial is that it's real life. You can really, climate change is a big thing. And for example, we're getting more severe weather events. That's something actuaries need to know, they need to pay attention to, and they need to figure out how to include that variable in their models. So what I like about actuarial is how we can look at the real world, pay attention to what's going on, and figure out how that impacts your day-to-day work.
I see. So quite a lot of research and making links there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And is that your favorite part of the job?
For me personally, no. I think actuarial also offers this unique ability to be a very technical, research-oriented person, or a very business-oriented person. And so if you want to be an actuary and you think you would be more comfortable sitting behind a computer working on models, then there's a role for you in actuarial. If you think you want to be in the business, but you do like math, but you want to be, having strategic conversations and talking to people, then there's also a role for you in actuarial. So that's what I like about it, because you have this unique balance between being very commercial or very, very technical. And for me personally, I I prefer the commercial side, so I like talking to underwriters, and I like thinking about the business a bit more.
Thank you. Thank you. And do you work in a team every day?
Yes, so I have a team of 3 people with me, and every day we are collaborating, we're peer reviewing each other's works, we're asking questions, we're brainstorming, and teamwork is going to be very important in actuarial because, you know, as I mentioned, you're going to have lots of complex things and you can't figure everything out on your own. So a really important skill is knowing when you need to ask for help from your fellow actuaries too.
Thank you. Well, that brings me on to my next question about asking for help, or whenever you've had to be really resilient. Have there ever been times when that's been the case?
Yeah, in terms of asking for help, definitely. There are times where, especially because I used to work in Latin America, and then I moved to work in the Europe area. And it's a different market and there's a lot to learn. So there were times when I first came here that I just didn't understand something. And at that point, you know, you have a few options. You can try to Google it on your own. But if it's a very technical thing, the chances are that you're not going to find the answer you're looking for. So you can look at what was done before, but you might still have some questions. And I think you need to figure out the balance between spending too much time trying to find something on your own and knowing when, you know what, I'll ask a question, it'll be over in 5 minutes and I can move on. So definitely I've encountered those kind of tough decisions in terms of when to ask for help. And in terms of being resilient, there are definitely times in the actuarial career where you have to have resilience. Now, something that's infamous about being an actuary is the exam process. It can be very difficult. There's a lot of exams and you're going to have to spend a lot of time studying even after you finish university. And I would say while I was working and studying at the same time, it becomes very difficult to manage your time. It's not impossible. And if you have a good strategy, you can do it because many people have done it. So don't let that deter you from a great career. But it definitely requires a lot of resilience. And so what I found was being very organized is what helped me to get through that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have heard about the number of exams that you take. So you do university and then there's exams afterwards as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. And you said you didn't always know that this was the job that you wanted, and you had an opportunity of an internship.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any role models when you were younger that really helped to inspire and encourage you to do what you're doing now?
You know what? I have had many role models growing up, and I can't say there was one person that encapsulated everything that I would say, okay, that is the person, I'm going to study them and become them in a way. It would be more like looking at someone, admiring one quality and saying, okay, let me try to take that from that person. For example, as I mentioned, I like sports, and I really looked up to Steven Gerrard when I was growing up, and I thought that he had really good leadership skills, and I liked how he would be able to turn the team around from a very difficult position. And so I mean, he was very resilient as well, if you think of it. So that would be an example of one quality that I would have wanted to take from that person. You can think about even just another random thing like Celine Dion. She sings really well and she has a lot of confidence about her and she has a lot of personality. She's not just, the standard celebrity. She actually puts a little bit of humor into her interviews too. And I thought, hey, that's different. I like that about her. And so in terms of role models, I would say not one, but many.
But many, thank you. And is that why you're involved with Maths for Girls?
Well, yeah, I think it'll be lovely if someone can look at the story and say, hey, maybe being an actuary is something I wanna do. And I would love to be able to reach out to young girls and say, hey, you can do it too. That's the message I really want to get across. It's that people might think it's a hard road, but it's so possible. It's absolutely possible. If you want it, go for it and you'll get it too.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.